What have the Romans ever done for us? Did the invading army do anything good for the British? Where do we begin? At its narrowest point, Britain is only 30 kilometers away from mainland Europe. But the sea surrounding the island is rough and temperamental. It was so hard to reach that for centuries people thought Britain was a mystery, perhaps even a myth. The earliest known name for the island was Albion, which translates as White Land, probably referring to the chalk cliffs of Dover. This was the name used by Greek geographers to distinguish it from Ireland. In the 1st century BC, thanks to the Romans, Britannia replaced Albion as the Latin name for Britain. It's also the Latinization of the native Brittonic word for Britain. By the 2nd century, Britannia was personified as a goddess with a spear and shield wearing a helmet. There are few songs more patriotic than Rule Britannia. It's ironic that the name came from the Romans. Before the Romans, information in Britain was passed from person to person by word of mouth and memory. The Romans brought Latin with them, which they could speak and write. While this was revolutionary, it took over 100 years for any natives to start using the language. A few schools were set up where boys were taught elementary reading, writing, and arithmetic, followed by grammar, which we'd call language and literature. They were also taught public speaking. It was the Britons who wanted to work with the Roman conquerors who would send their children to these schools. The natives who picked up Latin were important tribesmen, officials, some traders and craftsmen in towns, and rich villa owners in the countryside. From the 3rd century, Christian communities learned it too. The majority of the people still lived in the countryside and carried on as before the Roman invasion. They stayed illiterate. The Romans weren't interested in mass education in Britain. They planned to rule through an educated elite. Their written records of this time have given us so much information about how they led their lives and a greater understanding of history. A shopping list from this time tells us what they like to eat. Bruised beans, 2 modii. Chickens, 20. 100 apples. If you can find nice ones, 100 or 200 eggs if they are for sale there at a fair price. 8 sextarii of fish sauce. A modius of olives. Once they left in 410 AD, the country fell into chaos. Foreign invaders, the Angles and Saxons from Germany and Utes from southern Denmark, attacked and settled in Britain. They were illiterate barbarians and their Germanic language wiped out all traces of Latin. Towns were abandoned, public buildings became ruins, and the economy crashed. Britain had no proper roads before the Romans, just muddy tracks. The Romans built long, straight roads all across the land, over 16,000 kilometers, that's 10,000 miles of them. They knew the shortest distance between two places is a straight line, so all roads were as straight as possible. The foundations were clay, chalk, and gravel with bigger flat stones on top. They had ditches on either side so the rainwater could drain off. Initially, they were built for military use so that troops and supplies could move quickly, but they soon became invaluable for the trade and transportation of goods. The Romans created a national road network. After they left in 410 AD, no planning went into the road system until the 18th century. The fact the Roman road network was the only national managed highway system until the Ministry of Transport was set up in the 20th century. Some Roman routes are still in use today and have been converted into motorways or trunk routes. When the Romans came to stay in 43 AD, Britain was a fragmented, divided, disorganized land split into sections. People lived in huts in small, scattered tribes. The Romans built Britain's first towns as centers of administration to help them run the country. Within 17 years, they had established several major cities, each connected by Roman roads. They quickly became important centers for meeting and trade. A pre-Roman building was a timber and thatched roundhouse. The Romans built in stone and brick. The buildings were rectangular and made it easier for them to be lined up next to each other in streets. The cities were built on a grid system. In the center was the market square or forum with a great hall or basilica running along the length of the square. Council chambers and civic offices were linked to it. By the middle of the 2nd century, many of the 22 towns in Britain had a full set of magnificent public buildings that other parts of the empire had. These included bathhouses, temples, amphitheaters, as well as shops and offices. The scale of the architecture had never been seen in Britain before. The Roman baths in Bath, Somerset have been restored to their full glory to give us an idea of how grand life was for town people. The Roman governor ruled from the newly built city of Londinium. It became the capital of Roman Britain and is still the seat of government today, now known as the City of London. Before the Romans, there was no plumbing or sanitation in Britain. The Romans liked to be clean. Towns and forts were built for military, trade, or admin needs, and to keep things running smoothly, there had to be a constant supply of water. They didn't want to be restricted to living by a water source, so came up with one of the most advanced water supply and removal systems of the time. They built aqueducts to carry water from a river or spring to the town. There it would be divided up into smaller channels to supply homes and businesses. Wastewater was taken care of with the same neatness. The bathhouse water passed under the toilets and joined the main sewer. Homes and businesses were linked to the main sewer too, which in itself was another great feat of engineering. The pre-Roman Brits stayed warm by using a fire to heat one room. This was dangerous and the smoke could kill too. The Romans brought underfloor heating with them, which proved a real necessity in the freezing British winters. A furnace produced hot air, which would be sucked up by the floor and walls of a house, meaning you could live in more than one room and breathe clean air. The Romans were largely tolerant of other religions, apart from the Druids, who they hated with a passion. The Druids had originally come from Gaul and used to have a lot of influence in the Roman world. They said what they thought about education and politics. The Romans persecuted them for it. Both the Roman and British were pagans, but they had different sets of gods. Rome didn't mind who or what the people worshipped so long as they added the imperial cult into their prayers. This meant accepting emperors and some of their family members as being divine. The Romans built beautiful temples to worship in. Britain had never seen anything like these buildings before. The Colchester Temple was destroyed by the Boudiccan Rebellion, but was rebuilt soon afterwards. The temples were not just places of worship, but also centers for public ceremonies. In 391, Christianity became the main Roman religion. Some native Britons converted, but most still held on to their pagan beliefs. We think of fast food as a modern phenomenon, but food on the go was brought to Britain by the Romans. The thousands of soldiers based in forts around the country needed access to tasty food that could be made quickly, like burgers, pasties, and meatballs. Street food stalls would have been seen in all the large towns. They also fed the poor who didn't have access to kitchens or cooking equipment. You would also find fruits and vegetable stalls. The Romans brought apples, pears, peas, and grapes to Britain. They planted the grapes, and for the first time, the British had wine. The Romans brought coins with them to exchange for goods. This was another new concept. It was the same currency used across the empire, so would have worked in London and Tunisia. It would have consisted of gold, called an aureus, silver, which was a denarius, and brass referred to as a sestertius. The coins mainly came from the mint in Rome, but London and Colchester began producing them in the 3rd century. So what did the Romans do for Britain? Was Britain better off without them? What if they had stayed? Leave your comments below and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to be the first to see our latest content.